but I think as a generalist, you kind of naturally have a more strategic mindset because you're thinking broadly, thinking generally. Yeah, I agree. I think companies can't scale if they don't have some semblance of like structure and project management and program management and like change management. I think a lot of people on their own now probably go to ChatGPT and ask for like an initial idea, and I think that's the worst thing you can do.
Thanks a lot, Kevin, for being part of this KLIMB podcast episode. We're going to have an hour together to discuss a bit about your journey, your career so far, and talk about also what you do today. So thanks for accepting the invite.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The first question I have for you is super simple, is if you can tell me a bit about your journey and what was like the trigger point in your career that made you become a marketer?
It's a long journey, but the trigger point was probably high school, if I'm being honest. I started taking
Okay.
marketing classes in high school. I studied it in college. My final year of college, I interned at an ad agency called Hill Holiday and worked
Mm-hmm.
on the Dunkin' Donuts account with the team that created America Runs on Dunkin'. So I think
Okay.
that's where I really got my, cut my teeth in brand specifically and have been in brand marketing in some way, shape, or form, and it has many forms since. After that, moved to New York, worked at an ad agency again that was more rooted in the fashion industry. So I had clients like Jimmy Choo, Banana Republic, Revlon, so beauty, fashion. And then from there, went over to Michael Kors, massive fashion brand. And that's where I was actually first a creative project manager, but I just took the job that got me into the brand side rather than the agency side. But quickly switched over to global brand marketing and have been in it since. Moved around a couple of companies in that world, that kind of fashion e-commerce retail space, which is I think very unorthodox, especially now that I'm in tech SaaS world. But how that happened was I used a tool called Smartsheet for coincidentally
Mm-hmm.
in almost all of those jobs at the agency, at Michael Kors, at Uniqlo. Um, and so I was using this project management tool called Smartsheet for building campaigns, managing projects, doing the creative operations process. And unbeknownst to me, Smartsheet was trying to build certain plans and products for the marketing audience. And so they poached me to become like an internal subject matter expert. And I was also trying to move away from New York at the time. I'd been there for too long. I was getting a bit claustrophobic. I grew up in Seattle, and Smartsheet happened to be based in Bellevue, which is
Okay.
city over from Seattle. So I joined Smartsheet and this team. I think it was called Strategic Solutions. It was a brand new department. It sat within the sales engineering org. So I wasn't even a proper marketer there, but that's where I kind of learned the ropes of B2B sales led SaaS. So I kind of sat between product marketing and sales. And I would help the product marketing team like do the messaging and positioning and you kind of review marketing assets. But I would also join sales calls with enterprise customers that were marketers. So like I would talk to teams at Nike, at Converse, and kind of translate between the Smartsheet world and the marketing world to help these, sales engineers and salespeople build like custom solutions for marketers. And then I was there for almost 2 years, and then a couple people from Smartsheet on the marketing side that I worked with but not for moved over to Typeform, brought me with them, where I kind of rejoined a more traditional marketing team as the head of brand, and I've been there since, and it'll be 4 years in December.
Okay. 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 And one question that I'm always interesting about is like you work always in different companies. At some point, did you wanted to become an entrepreneur or build something on your own?
No, and funnily enough, my major in college, well, actually started in finance and accounting, but quickly switched out of that, was entrepreneurship and marketing. I
Okay.
think so. At some point in my life, I don't really remember thinking this or feeling this way, but at some point in my life, I did want to be an entrepreneur.
Okay.
But then I worked for really big companies where, frankly,
Yeah.
I've loved the process and the kind of organization that you find in bigger companies. Typeform is the smallest company I've ever worked at, and I don't think I say this now, so nobody hold this to me if you're watching it, but I don't think I would go much smaller, and definitely wouldn't start something on my own at this point in my career.
Okay, yeah. It's always a question I like to ask because I was never in a situation where I was like the biggest company I was in was like, I mean, I joined when we were 200. We quickly scaled to 650,
Okay.
and then I was like, it's too much,
Right.
and so I left. So yeah, I'm always curious about what are the key things that people look for when it comes to joining bigger organizations.
Yeah, I'm pretty type A. I joined Michael Kors right after it went public, so it was huge. There were thousands and thousands of employees, and there were
Yeah.
multiple offices across the globe. And I think that sometimes what I miss is like, they had massive teams just focused on making sure there was like information architecture, taxonomy, like using the right language, file naming had a system you had to follow. So like that kind of brings me some comfort. But on the flip side of that, you don't have much like latitude and freedom to do much. Like you were kind of following, for lack of a better word, like a guideline or a playbook, the way you approach anything. So that's where I don't have as much fun, especially in brand marketing. Also, being it's such a big brand, you're kind of just shepherding what already exists. You don't have a lot of freedom to like put your stamp on something or explore. You are essentially policing a very well-known existing brand. So there's pros and cons to big and small.
Yeah, I get it. And also linked to what you're doing today, at what point did you decide that you wanted to lean more into the strategic roles rather than working on project management? Because I see like a lot of that when it comes to career path in general. You can be like an expert, but like a super good individual contributor,
Right.
and just follow that career, and it's not a bad thing. And most of the time, people just tend to they feel like they must go into a managerial role to evolve, and there is another path. And so I'm just curious, to hear
Oh,
your take on that.
it's funny you mention versus being a project manager because I was a project manager for a couple of years, and I think that's when I realized I'd rather be on the other side of things, kind of dictating the strategy, what goes into the brief, because like, I think this is my own like crisis of faith all the time is that I want to do both sides of things.
Hmm.
But being a creative project manager specifically, I would, intake the briefs from marketers and assign them to creatives, copywriters, designers, whatever it may be. And I also have a lot of opinions. So as I was reviewing those things, I questioned them. Like, why would they want this? Or why is this the copy that they want? Or this messaging, I just wouldn't agree with a lot of things. And frankly, I didn't want to be a project manager forever. Like I said, I took that job just to kind of get into the business, but I realized where I had more value was on the front end of a project. Like, why are we doing this thing? How do we make it make sense? What are the elements we want? What are the channels? What are the tactics? So I've been a generalist my whole career. I've never owned a single channel as like a social media manager or an email marketer. So, and there's pros and cons to that as well, but I think it used to be something that I was not proud of because the market changes, the world changes. I think 10 years ago the kind of attitude was hire specialists, and now I think it's hire generalists, and give them AI
Mm,
to do all those specialties. So yeah,
yeah,
it flip flops, but I think as a generalist, you kind of naturally have a more strategic mindset because you're thinking broadly, thinking generally, and then you kind of defer to the experts or the tools to do the more tactical, channel based, specialty based things.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And I had another podcast episode that was released like a few weeks ago with the founding designer at Lovable. So as you know, they have a lot of hype these days.
Yes.
It's a very fast scaling company and so on. And we touched base on one thing because one of the question I had was like, how do you make that happen with only 30 people? And it's not some having a big scaling phase with not so many people, and they still want to stick with this fewer number of employees as long as they can. And one of the things that he told me is that they tend to hire generalists and people who were like good at doing a ton of things. And also they hired like even entrepreneurs in their team
Hmm.
because they felt like it was a good fit for them. And so of course they're using AI at several levels. But it reminds me of this. And I think it's something that makes sense. And also it makes me think of one other question for you is, so when you're hiring like people in your team, I think I saw on your LinkedIn you have 5 people in your team, something.
It's 12 now, but yeah.
Oh, say 12. Okay.
Yeah.
You need to update. But what is like something you look for so when hiring someone in your team?
Do you want to answer the first part of the question, the lovable, or just go to the...
Yeah, you can, of
Well,
course.
I think my answer to the lovable thing is sometimes the product can do all the work. I mean, lovable is a wildly innovative product, kind of coming on the heels of all the AI hype, and I think it has similar to hype that ChatGPT did. I think, most of the tools that are like AI first or, built on top of things like ChatGPT as an application haven't gotten as much hype, but lovable is, I think, putting its money where its mouth is as a product. And then I think their strategy seems to be very almost like build in public community, get people in it,
Yeah.
immediate activation, things like that. So I think that's why they can maintain a small team right now. But at some point, they're probably going to scale and bring on
Yeah,
more
of course.
marketers and things like that. The second part of your question, what do I look for in hiring people? Well, obviously it depends on the role, but for the most part, it's a really tough question. I think I have a lot of specialists on my team, so obviously there's some degree of how much experience do you have in your specialty.
Yeah.
But
Hard skills and stuff.
hard skills for sure. But I think for the most part, and what I kind of pride myself on is like just this insatiable appetite to like learn more things and try things and being excited about the work and people that are part of the world. I say this a lot, and I've done other podcasts where I'm like, for any marketing role, and by that I also include design, copy, anything that could potentially sit under the umbrella of marketing, you need to be kind of a constant consumer. And I don't mean like chronically online scrolling TikTok 6 hours a day, but what books are you reading, what shows are you watching, what inspires you, like where do you get inspiration from? And I think when I'm interviewing people and they only have examples of like, favorite brands or whatever that are in the space they're in, I think that's kind of a red flag. I only look at like my neighbors, and by that I mean like competitors, for what not to do, not for what to do. So I think it's sort of like, are you just out there? Are you learning? Are you kind of, and also just always growing in your own role. I'm like a forever, what's the word? Like continued education type of person. Like, what are you doing today to improve your current like expertise or something net new? Like I'm always reading. I have a stack of books behind me that are about various things in the marketing world, not just brands. So I think that's something I also look for, that you're just kind of eager to always grow and that you haven't capped out your expertise and now you're just waiting for like internal career ladders to bring you up, but you're doing things outside of your own job to make sure you're always advancing.
Yeah. And so on that, is there something that you learned recently that you want to share?
I haven't read a book on it per se, but I think as a brand marketer, the assumption is that you're like not data driven or you're less familiar with that world, and I think I am data literate, but I also have to defend like the way brand works and things like that, and how it's not as simple as how performance marketing can measure their work. So I've been doing a lot of random research on correlation and causation because I just see it talked about so much, and I understand it in theory and application for some things, but trying to figure out how I can really learn that lingo and apply it to some of the stuff that I do, because I think not a lot of people are data literate and they don't know the difference between correlation and causation, and that can lead to a lot of false assumptions about like what's driving what or what's correlating to what. And if you hang on the wrong thing, that's like maybe correlation, not causation, and then start making decisions based on that, it can have this domino effect to disaster. And I think so just being data literate in that sense, I don't have I figured out how to apply it to my day-to-day job yet? No, but I'm a lot of reading about it.
Okay. Well, it makes me think of one thing, and I think I saw it on your LinkedIn as well, is that you led also the rebranding of Typeform, like during your time at Typeform. And one of the questions I get asked most of the time when customers reach out to to do rebrandings is like, how do you measure the impact of a rebrand? And I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah.
So maybe you don't as well, but if you have some hints, I'm happy.
It's a tough question in this world for anything, not just a rebrand. Like, how do you measure the impact of insert whatever
Yeah,
you do as a brand?
campaign, content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, what we recently did, so it depends on what you're referring to. I've been at Typeform for 4 years. I think I've been through like three pseudo rebrands, a couple of logos.
Okay.
The current logo you see now was a rebrand that happened before I even had the creative team or had control, if you will, of the
Okay.
brand team. And then what we did more recently was kind of hone that down into what we called a brand refresh, just to like isolate some brand assets to use them more often for consistency in the market, but also add net new things like shape exploration, swapping out our illustrations for these things we're calling miniatures, which I'm happy to talk about. But in terms of measuring the impact, we did a lot of, I'm going to call it anecdotal message testing, like not stat sig testing on tools like Winter for, preference tests. Like we mocked up a homepage or an ad with a headline and a subhead, and just got people that are within our kind of target audience persona to react to that and give us that feedback. And also using our current employee base a lot. We've done like internal brand perception surveys, pre and post, creating net new assets that kind of represent our new brand refresh. So, but in terms of the impact in the market, it's really hard to say just because there's so many other variables that come with that and other things that are happening from the marketing team that, again, I don't necessarily have control of, whether it's demand generation, content, or things changing on the website. But yeah, in an ideal world too, we'd have, $1 million a year to do a brand awareness and perception survey every quarter where we can ask questions like, what color do you associate with Typeform? Like, do you associate a tagline with Typeform? And then we could probably start, more definitively saying like, look, this rebrand and these things that we're using more consistently are working in the market. People are remembering them more because at the end of the day, that's all we really want people to do is remember us for some future situation where they need us. But we don't have that today. We do work with the research team. I've done some kind of pulse brand awareness surveys every 6 months or so, but they're not quite at the scale you would expect if you were to hire like a Nielsen or a Kantar.
Okay. Okay, I see. And so, you touched base also on one thing, which is like the budget aspect, and it's something also I want to learn more about is like you get to have X amount per year, and so what's your approach to budgeting your marketing, actions? How do you plan that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So when it was almost a year and a half ago, maybe, that I absorbed the creative team, and I've had an existing budget. I've had the same budget for a couple of years, and for the most part, the line items are locked. Like how much we spend on creative, how much we spend on content development, how much we spend on usage rights or things like that. It wasn't until 2025 planning that I really even had the opportunity to get my hands on the budget and switch things around. And for the most part, it was a lot of like asking people that were on my team now, like, what did we spend this on? What did we spend this on? What did we spend this on? And then kind of retroactively going back to those things that we spent money on to see if did they do anything. Like there's obviously like postmortems and recaps and campaign recaps on things, but we spent money on last year a lot on like producing blog articles, but now I think our strategy next year is not going to be so blog specific, and that line item that was for content production for the blog is probably going to shift more towards like video production or for social or for doing more like video style content, like interviews that the person who managed the blog would still be managing, just not for hiring writers to like write blog content. And that's not definitive. Like I think there's still probably some world where we need to be doing more content production for SEO, which is I feel like coming back in weird ways, and AIO or AEO. But yeah, I think it's a little just I think people take budgets and assume you just want to increase, like you hope that you get from the leadership team some sort of increase in your budget, and then you can add whatever percent to every line item. But I think you should really comb through each line item and be like, what was made out of this money, And is it still making us money, or is there something else we want to do that maybe we haven't even done at this company that we want to invest in?
Okay.
And then there's a lot of conversations with leadership and with the board and things like that to get that approved, but that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. And do you also try to budget somehow the time you guys spend on something? And so like like your team, like knowing that when someone spends X time on a campaign, it costs X to the company, and so that would also help you assess internally the different efforts and prioritize things.
Yeah, we do. So we have I think, relatively small full-time creative team, and then we have an agency. I wouldn't even call them an agency. They are, but they're very kind of a scrappy small agency that truly is like embedded into all of our systems and teams. But when we get creative requests specifically, or even when we're working on campaigns and we're assessing all the deliverables and what's needed in these things, it's a landing page, it's a set of ads, it's employee social posts, it's organic social, whatever. We go with my creative operations manager kind of line by line, and based on the brief and whoever filled that out, we kind of ballpark the resources needed to do this, and we use a point system, which is essentially 1 point is 1 day. Something can be 0.25, something can be 0.5, and that's actually how we work with the agency to get like an estimate to bill their time. And if they spend less time on something or more time on something, they're pretty honest and will tell us like if it went up or it went down. But we use that same point system to kind of reflect our own team's work. It's almost like the concept of like earned media value, like when doing a social post, like how much would this be if you were to pay for it in another area? So I think it's the benefit of having agencies. You kind of are forced to use this system to plan for resources and cost out time, and you can apply that to our own team. So sometimes I'll report on things. I remember we worked on something last year that just used a lot more of my team's resources than we planned for. So I would go back to my boss at the time and say, like, from a cost perspective, obviously it's just full-time employees. This is how much time went into it and how much it like cost us had we worked with the agency that we have on it. So it's more just for perspective and kind of they can get their arms around like, whoa, that's way more of your team's time than you should have planned because it only gave us this much and it had this much impact in the market.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. I'm realizing as you speak that I didn't ask you the the most simple question, which is like, what do you do exactly at Typeform?
Oh yeah.
So if you can like also tell me about like your exact scope and like what are you currently working on?
Yeah, so I think the title it's changed. Senior Director of Brand Marketing, and that also requires definition because, like I said, it can take many shapes in many different companies. But at Typeform, that's essentially two-ish teams. I have the creative team. So what you would expect of a creative team, co-heads of creative, principal designers, senior designers, motion designer, creative operations. And then I have the content team. So I have a head of content and social, and under her is a content marketing manager, a social media manager, an SEO specialist. I have a dotted line to comms. So we have like a PR comms person who kind of does internal comms and reports to one person for that, but also PR and external comms who works with me on that stuff. And then I have a brand marketing strategist / brand marketing manager, and that's kind of where I used to, before her, I would say I was the individual contributor when it came to like brand marketing and brand strategy. Like I think in some instances, like I know like Zapier, for example, there's a whole team on that brands part where there's like 3 brand strategists, brand marketing, brand campaign manager.
Yeah.
We kind of make do with what we have to fill those gaps, but we don't have that filled out. So it's those 3.5 functions.
Yeah. Yeah, I did an episode recently with Joe, who's like a brand design lead at Zapier.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, we talked about that a little bit. Okay, and so what are like, because I think I have too many questions at the same time. One thing is, do you also manage the website in your scope when it comes to content?
No. So not directly. There's sort of a framework that currently exists, and I'm sure it's going to change soon. We have a new VP of marketing who has a ton of web experience, and I think she probably has her own idea for how it should run. Web has been a little bit of a hot potato at Typeform the past few months. There's some sort of framework where we kind of have different tiers of pages and who is responsible for each of those pages. Like currently, brand is responsible for the homepage. So if we want to go redo the homepage, like I'm responsible for putting that brief together. Obviously, working with like the PMM team and all the necessary parties. But there is no head of web currently. There's, I think, an active role that we're posting for. And then I have, like I mentioned, under my head of content and social SEO lead, who has been promoted into this more growth CRO site role. So he's currently kind of like interim responsible for the web. Excuse me. And then we also work with an agency who originally we brought on board to help us migrate from Contentful to Webflow. And now they're kind of helping us maintain the website while we kind of rebuild our internal team for it.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And so to touch base a bit on this SEO aspect, how did you guys approach this shift when it comes to AI, AEO, GEO, I don't know how to call it, and the fact that maybe you guys also, like every website on the planet, noticed a drop in your search traffic coming from Google and stuff. So what's your overall approach, and what's your take also more like generally about consumption? I would say consumption approach for people buying that kind of tools.
So for the general approach, we all saw the dip in organic traffic when everyone else did this past couple of years. So I think it is silly to abandon SEO. I think, depending on which data you're looking at, Google still dominates like the search market. So I don't think you can fully throw that away. Our approach specifically is like, let's not worry so much about the blog generating the traffic, but like, what about the actual web pages in our site architecture on our main website? So that's still a focus for us. We still want to kind of claw back some of the loss we saw in organic search on Google. In terms of AEO, I've seen so many acronyms for the AI generated search. We're just starting to scratch the surface there. I think we do pretty well. I think that's probably just because, in the current space we're in,
you're still a leader.
Player. Yeah. But I've been reading a lot about it, and it seems to be that the thing that influences AI search results more than anything is like PR, and just how much noise you have out there that you don't really have control over. And there's a work back to all that, and PR also depends on how much you're innovating and really launching your products or doing interesting things or new campaigns or events. So that's something that's a hot topic for 2026. And then in terms of, did you ask me about tools?
I didn't ask you about tools, but I wanted also to recommend a tool. But you can jump on that.
Go for it.
No, I was because I recently I came across like a tool that's called Utterly.ai, and it's some kind of SEMrush but for AEO, and so I think it can help also to just try to understand how to position yourself with that kind of generative search engines.
Awesome. I was looking at a company called Profound. We also have Surfer, which I think has some of those capabilities, and I'm sure on their product roadmap is going to.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's definitely the right tools will be very important here. It actually is very similar to the way that like social media monitoring works now. Like these tools and like how you can get into these search engines and how you show up and what people are saying. It's very similar to what we've always been doing on social for years.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, and to continue on this Typeform topic, also I'm just curious to hear about like what's the culture at Typeform in general, because it's just a renowned company, and so I'm just curious to hear a bit about your experience and if there is something unique. For instance, at Zapier, one of the key things that Joe mentioned is the fact that it's a full remote company, and so that's one thing that is quite differentiative. So yeah,
is a what company?
Full remote. It's full remote, like no office at all.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. That's the first word that comes to mind is globally remote. When I joined 4 years ago, we had, I still say Barcelona based because I think majority of our workforce is still in Barcelona. That's where the headquarters was. A couple of years ago, we had the HQ there. We had a satellite office in San Francisco. But they made the decision a couple of years ago to get rid of both of them and just kind of enable a globally remote workforce. So, and that comes with its pros and it comes with its cons. I think it's amazing in terms of, my team, I have people in Greece, the UK, Spain, random states in the US, London. So, like I said, UK already. But yeah, from a culture perspective, it literally by definition is so multicultural, which is amazing. And I think is very helpful for marketing, especially if you're kind of a global company. Most of our brand marketing efforts last year were focused on the US, but I think we're expanding that in the future. So having those different perspectives is amazing. There's been a lot of change at Typeform. It's public knowledge. You can see the announcements of new C-suite leaders that have come in over the past few years. I've been through a few myself. It seems the most sturdy and most exciting now because it seems like we're finally building momentum. I think for a while there it was stop, start, a lot of changes, a lot of pivots, but I think everyone in this world and in this space, especially because of AI and because of COVID and things like that, is doing the same thing. But yeah, it's great. I wouldn't still be here if I didn't like the culture. 4 years, come December, this will be the longest I've stayed at one company.
Okay.
Yeah, so that says anything.
It's a good sign. Yeah, definitely. And so, well, okay, sounds good. And now I wanted to also to ask you about. We talked a bit about AI with the search engine thing, but also how do you approach AI as a company and as a brand specialist?
Yeah, as a company, it's going to be more of a 2026 thing. I just came from an offsite where we talked a lot about how we can have a more AI-enabled workforce. What tools do we need? What education do we need? I think tools are half the battle. Last year, maybe a year and a half ago, actually, we brought on an enterprise grade writing copy tool to help people self-serve more kind of copywriting themselves, and it didn't take. There wasn't enough enablement, there wasn't enough education. We couldn't take that on ourselves. We didn't get the right plan to have people like CSMs come in and train our team, and ultimately deprecated the tool a couple of months ago because it just didn't get enough usage for what we were paying for. I think like any company, we're all doing some things, on our own in our own ChatGPT accounts, on our personal emails or what have you. But my creative team has done. We have a stand-up, I think every week, every 2 weeks, what they're calling the AI Kitchen, where they're exploring how, as a creative team, they can kind of operationalize some of their work without sacrificing creativity. Like I was mentioning earlier, we have these new brand assets that we're calling miniatures, and we may or may not use them forever. I'm saying that because they're still in question, but essentially, I was sick of seeing these line drawing illustrations that every single company was using to fill empty spaces and as part of their brand assets. Let Notion have that. Let them do it. Let's find other things, guys. So we worked on these things called miniatures, which are essentially we're a B2B2C tool. So our customers have their own customers or audiences or employees, however they may be using Typeform. And at the end of the day, you're using Typeform to get data or information or get questions answered from people. And I kind of said and thought that I think people use the word data too loosely, and we used it too. And at the end of the day, the data we're talking about is data literally from people, zero-party data. And I think we almost depersonify it too much in the market. And so why don't we bring this to life by we have a bunch of mock customers we use, similar to a Squarespace, where they're inspired by real customers, but we have a little more latitude if we don't use real customers. So we created these using AI, miniatures of people that are supposed to represent our customers. So that's just one example of how we're using AI. And, I'm surprised that the creative team is the one who came up with that first, because I think the kind of the assumption in the market is the creators are no, anti-AI, and in some cases they are, and in certain areas I think there's good use, there's bad use. But yeah, so we're starting, and I know there's going to be more of an initiative and more of a top-down push next year to make sure we're all using it in certain ways to not just do more but do better, and faster. More, better, faster. That's just name of the game.
Okay. And I was browsing your website also, see how you guys are copying using copy around AI, because a lot of the companies, they just like put AI as a buzzword, but they didn't build anything with AI in their product. And one thing also that struck me is like you guys are not just doing forms, and you're doing much more. And I think it's not something that people are super aware about when it comes to Typeform. And so if you can just tell me a bit more about this, like what's the overall product suite?
It's like you were a fly on the wall in our offsite this week because that is something we need to change. I think, for better or worse, we are only associated with forms, and we've been very clearly in the form builder category for the past 12 years. There's been a lot of product innovation, a lot of features, whether it's integrations or we have something coming out in October that's going to be more about like workflows. We have AI features beyond just like create a form with AI, but it's um, like AI insights, for example. And I think the website you see today, like the homepage, hasn't been updated for a year, and that's in part due to the fact that I mentioned that our web team has kind of moved around and struggled. We've had
Yeah.
some strategic shifts, and we don't. It converts well, so we're like, let's just not touch it until we really know what we're doing in terms of like being an AI first company and having AI throughout the product. But so I guess to answer your question is that's all going to change probably in the next few months, next year. The product suite is still, I think we're depends on who you ask. I would still consider us like a single product company, but we are
Yeah.
very horizontal. Again, that has its pros and cons, and there are so many use cases and applications of a form, a quiz, or a survey, and what you do with that data. So many integrations you can play with. So that's all going to be changing soon. I think we're slowly evolving into properly more of a platform, which I don't use that word lightly. I think people just kind of slap that. Now we're a platform, but that's seems to be where we're headed.
Okay. Because it makes me think also, because I saw you guys had a product that was called Videoask,
Hmm.
and so is it? I don't know if it was like a product that you guys created or if it was an acquisition, but it's more like a question I have, like in general, is like, if you look at this horizontal approach, do you think you're looking at acquiring companies into this build this platform? And also, I think like I'm using Supercut, and I think it's one of the company that was built by one of the founder of Typeform something.
David, yeah.
Like, yeah. So just curious about this.
Yeah, so Videoask was not an acquisition. It was our own company, but it was built separately. I'm not a technical engineer. I don't know how that worked, but we essentially, for a period of time, we had this almost, we called it Typeform Labs, like an incubator where we could build other products with the end goal of either
Okay.
selling them or migrating them to our core product. Video
Okay.
Ask,
Nice.
we now have features in Typeform similar to Video Ask, and I think it's slowly migrating over time. But yeah, that was never really considered. It had its own brand for a reason. It wasn't under the Typeform umbrella. That's why
Yeah.
people don't know. A lot of people ask that question, like, "Oh, did you guys acquire that tool?" No, we made it. It just seemed like a different tool.
Okay. Okay. And so Supercut is also another company completely.
Yes, another
Super. Yeah.
company. Yes, totally.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Well, I wanted to go back also to the scope of what you're doing today.
Mhm.
And I think one of the big things that you do, as you mentioned it, is like running campaigns, like large scale campaigns. Um, and so I'm just curious about your approach when it comes to investing $1 million into a global campaign. How do you go with it? Like, what's the creative inspiration and stuff?
Um, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes from like the core audience messaging. I think, and so let me go back. We did a campaign last year called we called that Now You Know. I think it was a
Okay.
very traditional brand campaign, and I say that because I think the future of brand marketing is not going to be just like, hey, you do 2 or 4 brand campaigns a year, you put a lot of paid media spend behind it. But in that regard, we did this campaign last year called Now You Know, specifically because we saw things like direct traffic declining, organic traffic declining, all these signals that kind of told us in the US specifically are we were kind of losing market share and losing brand awareness, and those things I think are correlated. So pitched the idea to do this brand campaign to also just kind of remind the market, like, hey, we're still alive and kicking. I think if you stop doing brand marketing, people are like, oh, you're not innovating. It's just a mental association people make.
Yeah.
The creativity in terms of the creative there, I worked with the company, an agency called Red Antler. Highly recommend. Specifically wanted to work with an agency that did not just do B2B SaaS marketing.
Okay.
Because I think, again, we're a B2B to C tool. I think we have this kind of like cool association. A lot of use cases are very kind of e-commerce consumer related. Some are more B2B lead gen related. And I think I'll die on this hill. There's far more creativity in the B2C consumer space. So if you work with
Yeah.
an agency that has done really strong campaigns that you really liked, Red Antler did the campaign for Hinge, designed to be deleted, which I think is one of the most like powerful lines of copy ever for what Hinge is as a dating platform. So we worked with them, and their process was incredible on how they kind of come up with ideas. But what I pride myself on is putting together a very strong creative brief, and that was in and of itself, just the brief, literally just a document, was like a cross-functional project. Because it was a big investment. Pitched the idea of doing this campaign up to the leadership team, up to the CEO. So carefully brought them into certain parts of building the brief together. Like, do you agree on this is the audience? Do you agree this is what you want people to feel after seeing the campaign? Do you agree this is the mental association? Now, I say cross-functional, and I say carefully because if you just you can't do a brief by committee. It's the worst thing you can do. So we agreed on all these elements, and I used the kind of get who to buy framework, which is like get audience to think a certain thing, who do a certain thing by saying a certain thing. That's like the framework I use. I think it's like an old advertising framework, which we've actually absorbed into some of our creative briefs internally. And then worked with them and my creative team. My creative team was sort of like the kind of brand guardians, working with Red Antler, making sure that you don't want to go to a brand campaign that looks completely different from what your brand is, because then no one's going to make that mental association, even if you slap on your logo. So yeah, it was a long process.
Okay, I get it. And so it makes me think also about like all the classic campaigns you can have like during the year. Do you also, I'm guessing, like you're also surfing on the classic campaigns like Black Friday, Christmas, and other momentums. And so is there like something like you're cooking right now for that matter?
Not. Do you mean campaigns where we have a Black Friday discount, or we're pitching Typeform as a tool for their Black Friday?
Oh, okay, yeah. You're right. There's both approach.
So
Um,
we focus more on the latter, just to answer that. So
okay.
we have done Black Friday campaigns where we're like, hey, here's our promo code Black Friday, sign up for Typeform. But Typeform is actually a very strong e-commerce tool. Like a lot of customers come in and use us for like product recommendation quizzes. That's how I got interested in this space at all in general. Having come from that e-commerce world, I
Yeah.
used a form builder or a quiz builder to build like a product match quiz for like Valentine's Day. Like, answer these 4 questions about your girlfriend and we'll tell you exactly what product you got to buy her. And it is crazy how much those things can sell a product, because people are not confident in, like, purchases. It's almost like a personal shopper. But anyway, to answer your question, I think we're doing a light touch for Black Friday, Cyber Monday at this point in October or September, sorry. Those companies have already largely baked their plans. We would do holiday planning when I worked at Michael Kors in July. Like, we would do our shoot, we would have our campaign ready. So I think it's more of like getting some awareness of Typeform in that space around that time, but we're too late to like do a full campaign, like use Typeform for your Black Friday, Cyber Monday. But
Okay.
separate to that kind of holiday-based campaign, we are cooking up a second iteration of a campaign we did earlier this year called Get Real. And that's something that we will be.
Yeah, I think I saw it. This one.
Yeah, so it's essentially a campaign that uses Typeform, but in a way that is meant to kind of like start a conversation about a certain topic that's a topic that our audience cares about, so people kind of get their hands on the product. It's almost like subliminal. We don't want it to be like about Typeform. We want it to be about something else, almost like content marketing, as you write about in a certain topic, but the vehicle in which we get the information is Typeform.
Yeah.
And highlight certain features like video answers, audio answers, So we're cooking up that one, the survey actually, because there's two parts to that campaign. The survey launch, where we've like contracted influencers. We're going to be on Substack this year. Is launching the survey. We want to get 1,000+ responses, so it's like press worthy when we do the report. And then a month and a half later, we produce the report, and then have like a second campaign for that. So that's starting next week.
Okay. And so you mentioned influencers. How do you work with influencers? Is it like B2C influencers, or also, because now I'm seeing more and more B2B influencers on LinkedIn? Like, what's your approach to that?
Yeah, we for the most part have worked with B2B influencers. I do think there's a lot of opportunity, especially in our space, to maybe work with B2C influencers. But yeah, we work with a small, great agency. We have for about a year now, and we
Okay.
have a set budget allotted where we use them differently. Sometimes it's like, hey, same with like marketing. Like this set of influencers is going to be more like general Typeform awareness. This one is going to be about the Get Real campaign. This group is going to be maybe focused on a certain feature we're launching. Like when we did video, we had a group talk about video. So it's almost like in and of itself this like marketing microcosm where we kind of use them for different purposes. And we've learned a ton. Like there's so many ways to approach influencer marketing. We did it for a solid year. So now when we go into 2026 planning, we have a lot of ideas on how that might change.
Okay. And is it like, and so is it people just posting things on LinkedIn, or is it like blog posts, or is it, oh, like, what's the end result?
Yeah, we focus mostly on LinkedIn. We have some TikTok as well. There are some more generic ones that are like just about Typeform and kind of highlighting it. I don't know if those are great when you're actually going to end up using them for paid, like when you turn those on to paid posts, because they're just kind of like always on brand awareness ads, but they're
Yeah,
not
okay.
great in terms of like being organic, engaging content that the influencer is good at. So the ones that do work really well is when we give them, and we give them all this, but when we give them Typeform and ask them to do something with it, like use Typeform to ask an audience to your question. I mean, ask your audience a question that you want to know, or build something cool in Typeform. So we really want them to try to like play around with the product. And at the end of the day, it's a tool that you can use to engage with people. So we'd be remiss not to have them build, interesting forms. Sometimes there's like really silly questions they want to ask their audience and they just use it via Typeform, and we're fine with that for now. But I think it's going to evolve as you mentioned, our product does a lot more than just forms. We're going to have to rethink how we engage with influencers to talk about that kind of bigger product vision.
Okay. I think we've covered a ton of topics. I do have a lot of other questions, but if you want, we can make it like some hot takes, quick question, so you can quickly answer it. So what if you were not a marketer? What would you have done? It can be a completely different field.
I'd probably be a book editor.
Okay.
A very big reader. I mean, I'd like to say I'd write a book one day, but I like reading them more, and I think editors get to read more books. And just like, I read books, and I'm like, oh, they should have done this. They should have said this, this, and this. And the character did this. I think that's what an editor kind of does. So yeah, that'd be a dream job. Just sit in a corner and read all day and mark up scripts.
Okay. So, I mean, the second question following this one is like, what's your biggest inspiration outside of work? But you cannot answer rating.
Okay, so not books. Biggest inspiration outside of work. At the end of the day, all of my life is involved. It's just books, movies, and TV. So it's one of those three.
Okay. Okay. It's fine. Any TV show or movie that you recently, you would like to recommend?
This is shocking to a lot of people, but I'm finally watching The Sopranos for the first time.
I didn't watch it, so
It's
same
incredible.
team here.
Yeah, I
Okay.
highly recommend it. I mean, the first few seasons feel old and look old, but it really gets going. So I highly recommend it. I mean, it's on so many lists for like one of the best TV shows of all time, but I'm just for some reason not an organized crime person. Like I don't really care about the topic. But The Sopranos is much more about like the family drama and like living in modern day as like a criminal in like a suburban neighborhood. It's good.
Okay. Okay. Nice. I will have a look at it.
Yeah.
Um, I know that you had to sell a lot of your projects internally to make them happen. So what's a pro tip for someone that would need advice on that? How to sell a project internally?
Yeah, it's tough, especially if you don't have historical data from your company. I think a lot of leadership, they just want to know like where's the data. So making sure you have pretty solid sources of like third-party data to kind of supplement why you're doing something. Have principles you're really strong about. Like I'm one of those like 95/5 rule people that just constantly talks about the 95/5 rule. So when I pitched that brand campaign last year, I kind of explained that in layman's terms. Not that it needed to be layman's terms, but just how important it is to speak to future growth. I think a lot of, SaaS companies specifically are very much in the moment and in the quarter, and they're like, how do we boost revenue this quarter? And I'm like, by doing something 6 months ago. So if you kind of explain it that way, you can get a lot of leverage for like future things, but it's hard because you don't budget for 2 years from now. And that's, I think, 3 years from now, and brand has a lot of impact there. And also, I'm lucky in the fact that I have the creative team. Not that I abuse them for this, but like getting really solid mock-ups of what you're talking about and making sure you put a disclaimer on them that it's for placement only and it's not the final output. But yeah, I mean, it's an internal presentation is no different than like pitching to a group of investors. Like you need to
Yeah, I agree.
sell the vision and also back it up with some semblance of data, even if it's someone else's.
Yeah, get it. What's like one underrated skill that marketers should build early on in their career?
Project management. I am lucky that I fell into that early in my career. Like I said, kind of just to get into a brand, but it's crazy how many hours and just kind of get wasted away from lack of good project management processes to move things along. And I think it's an underrated skill. I think it's an underrated department. And I am so glad that I have that in my toolkit.
Yeah, I can. I mean, I completely agree because, I built my agency on my own for like a year,
Hmm.
and then I did bring in like a business partner, and his specialty was like project management,
Yep.
and from there we just scaled like crazy because it's just something that it's super hard because I also I saw it with him like when he was selling himself a bit.
Yeah.
It's super hard to assess someone who's good at project management. You have to see it like running. And so I completely agree because when now I'm thinking back at it, it's like the best decision I could ever do
Yeah.
for the company to have someone managing projects and making the delivery happen. It's all in the small things
Yep.
and that the things that no one want to do. So
And it's the most thankless job. Like I thank them because I've done it and I've been in their shoes. But as a project manager, you're pretty much just annoying people all the time
mm,
to like get their stuff done. And I think there's, it's changed a little bit. There's so many tools and processes to help you. But yeah, I agree. I think companies can't scale if they don't have some semblance of like structure and project management and program management and like change management. You're just going to constantly break, especially if you add more people to it.
yeah. Is there any part of like your creative process that you would never automate or see it taken from AI by AI?
Oof. Probably the brainstorming. I think a lot of people on their own now probably go to ChatGPT and ask for like an initial idea, and I think that's the worst thing you can do because it's going to give you a very mundane idea. I mean, some are good, some sound good in theory, but I don't think anything can ever beat doing a brainstorm, ideally in person, with like phones in a basket. Like no one can use AI.
Mm,
I think that kind of early conversation and discussion is when you have all these like, oh yeah, that, and then this, and that can't be repeated. And that's where I think I'm sure if you look at all the campaigns you like admire, talk to the people who made them, they had some sort of process like that that didn't start with AI. I think it can refine ideas. Like I think it can pressure test them. You can put an idea in and be like, give me any objections to this tagline or this approach or this messaging. Like sure, but don't start there.
okay, sounds
Can,
good.
can
And two last questions.
Yeah.
One being a personal project you'd like to explore for yourself for the end of the year.
Oh man. personal project I'd like to explore.
Can be for next year. I mean, I don't.
Um, Speaking of project management, I'm a pretty big Notion fan. I think I have some issues with it using it at like a large scale company, but I have been meaning to do like a life organizer. I started one in Notion where it's like my passwords and my finances and all that stuff. And
Mm,
I have like the skeleton of a like Heaven headquarters Notion thing, but I've
mhm.
keep kicking the can down the road to actually go and build it out. But again, that's like the type A me talking out. I want just like a organized digital space for my life.
Okay, I get it. I think. I mean, I did the same, so I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And so, final question is: it like anyone I should invite to come and join me into another Climb podcast episode?
Sorry, I missed the beginning of that. What was it?
Anyone I should invite to come and join me for another episode of this Climb podcast? Someone you're thinking about, top of mind in your network, or someone that could be interesting to interview?
Um, if you haven't already, I'm sorry I haven't gone through all of them, your podcasts, either Kira Kloss.
Well, we chatted already,
Okay.
but I didn't invite her. So she's a good friend of Stephanie Bowker,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and so yeah, that's a good call, I think.
Yeah, funny. I met Stephanie Bowker through Kira Kloss's like
Okay,
Black community channel group.
okay,
Yeah.
well, sounds good. Well, it's a wrap, I think. Thanks a lot, Kevin, for taking the time to record this podcast episode with me. It was really nice to chat to you, learn about, I mean, a lot of different things from your experience at Typeform, of course, but a lot of different things, your takes on, brand marketing, AI and stuff. So thanks a lot again.
Thank you, Michael.